Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast, brought to you by The Nurse Speak, a show where we rally some of our nation's greatest nurse leaders, educators, experts, and advocates to tackle some of the greatest challenges that the nursing profession faces. My name is Damian Jenkins, and I'm your host for the show. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn that nurses can do anything. All right, Christopher, thank you so much for being on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners, let them know a little bit about who you are, where you started in nursing, and where you are today.
Thank you so much, Damian. I'm so excited to be here. I've followed the show for a while, so I'm humbled to be able to share a bit of my story in the hope that it might be helpful for somebody else. That's what we're always hoping for as nurses, I think.
Yes, thank you
Um,
for being here.
I have been in the nursing profession for a couple of decades at this point, and I would say in the nursing discipline for a few years now, sort of more perspective and experience within that. I started as a as a home kind of a certified nurse's aide without the certification. It was working as a mental health worker in an acute care psychiatric facility, working inpatient. Did that for about 5 years while I went to school to become a registered nurse. Was a registered nurse for 5 years. And then as I was doing that, I was studying to become a nurse practitioner. And that geriatrics has been the specialty sort of throughout this entire time. And I've practiced now as a geriatric nurse practitioner since 2014. Had been working full time sort of throughout this whole time. Took a little break during the pandemic. After the pandemic, really, after burning out a bit, more than a bit, to say the least,
Mhm.
and decided to go back to school to pursue my PhD in nursing science. I'm now most of the way through that, and now I'm working, continuing as a nurse practitioner, but working in a leadership position as associate medical director and the director of educational programming and research for a managed long-term care company, providing nursing home level care for folks within their homes in community settings.
Wow. So first of all, hats off to you. You've done so much. So you said a couple decades. Can you give us an approximate how many years? Like you talk about like 20 years? Like how long have
Sure.
you been doing this?
Yeah, no, it's so 21 years by
Okay.
the count as of today. Yeah, so I got into nursing in 2004.
Amazing. Awesome. So first of all, thank you, right, for all your years of service. I'm sure the many, many lives you've touched, huge impact. And then I know recently we had a side conversation on LinkedIn regarding one of the last episodes that was released for the podcast. And you wanted to chime in and say, thank you for reminding you that your impact as an educator or as a leader goes far more than one patient at a time or one student at a time. And that's true because when you are teaching or you're in a space of leadership and you're impacting multiple clinicians, whether it's CNAs, nurses, or people in the leadership team, your impact is magnitude, right? It's multiplied by hundreds because for the one nurse you train, that nurse is now helping many other people. They train more people in the future, so on and so forth. So your impact, whether it be one person at a time, a classroom of people at a time, or an organization at a time, is so imperative. And it's what we all need to do to make sure that we're keeping the nursing profession viable, keeping it educated, keeping it evidence based, and trying to develop those strategies so we can improve some of the challenges that we're facing. And I think that's where you are in your career, right?
Yes, I very much appreciate you saying that because this transition to my leadership position has been intimidating in several ways.
Sure.
Because I've been on this PhD in nursing science journey, and I've been working full time with this managed long term care company since about 2017, actually.
Hmm.
Variety of reasons why I kind of went that direction, and as I've been working as a nurse practitioner. And as I've been sort of approaching this position, this sort of pause in my direct care career to go back to school and pursue this PhD in nursing science was really this amazing opportunity for me to kind of look at what else I could do. And really that's been sort of a theme throughout my entire career of
Sure.
when I was working as a mental health worker, I was looking around and I was thinking I could do so much more. I could learn so much more. There's so much more to learn throughout this whole process. And that's really what brought me to become a registered nurse.
Yeah.
And my sort of journey leading up to that was, um, I'm not one of those people that sort of has known that I was going to be a nurse my entire life. I didn't
Hmm.
have any particularly, I have no nurses in my family,
Hmm.
that I was ever aware of or am aware of. Um, and, but I've always been fascinated by people and
Hmm.
how people interact with each other
Hmm.
and why we make the decisions that we do. And I can remember all these instances, sort of growing up, like, young, like child formative years of kind of brokering conversations when there was conflict or sort of trying to be a bridge between people. And as I think about kind of my nursing experience, you're that bridge,
Hmm.
between the patient and sometimes the ordering provider, whether it be another nurse practitioner or a PA or a doctor. So you're sort of constantly that bridge and you're constantly negotiating all these different sort of scenarios and personalities and lots of different things. So I think it's been that fascination that's really carried me through and sort of driven me to learn and help and care kind of as much as I possibly could. And really that's sort of kind of been a driving force, I think, in most of my career anyway. Um, and this again, sort of getting back to what you were saying about my sort of reservations, I think about
Hmm.
leaving direct care. I've loved direct care.
Yeah.
I working as a nurse's aide, working as an RN, working as an NP. I mean, the most satisfying experiences that I've had in nursing have been working at the bedside.
Yeah.
And it was a huge thing for me when I was considering this pause because I was exhausted. I was working direct care primarily in the community, doing home visits during the pandemic. Um, saw a lot, experienced a lot, was, just that high level of stress, that high level of exhaustion that you're just sort of living with and kind of burning through each and every day until
Yeah.
and I always kind of told myself we've always met, we've met those nurses in nursing that probably should have stepped away a few years ago. Like they sort of keep working kind of beyond their expiration date. We can all kind of imagine that person, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of examples that I think lots of folks can probably come up with. I certainly can.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I didn't think I'd become one of those people, but I think I did. I think I sort of nudged up against that a little
Yeah.
more than I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And after it sort of snuck up on me and I sort of hit that realization, then it was a sit down with my husband. It was a sit down and it's sort of like, what do I want to do next? And it
Hmm.
was the realization that I think I needed to kind of take a pause from from direct care for a bit and sort of expand my perspective, recharge my battery. Academia has always done that for me, whether it
Yes.
be board certifications or degrees or whatever it's been. I've accomplished a lot just scholastically as far as that goes. Always enjoyed continuing ed,
Yeah.
and when I really got into the PhD in nursing science and really sort of understood or continuing to understand, I think sort of nursing more at the disciplinary level, that kind of higher level, I think it really helped me connect with the profession and the discipline so much more than I think
Hmm.
I ever would have expected. And then it was, well, what can I do with this? And does that look like me still being a nurse practitioner? Because I've been in this amazing situation where working as an RN, working as a mental health worker and working as an NP, I've been content in all of those job roles. I've been
Yeah.
very, very happy with that. And contentment, in fact, is the sort of subject of my dissertation. Actually, I can talk for an hour about that.
Great.
We don't have to get into
Amazing.
that, but I've been very fortunate to sort of really enjoy the different roles that I've had. So
Yes.
this idea of approaching something away from direct care um, was really daunting, and
Yes.
it's been nice to be reminded that the impact that I can have can move far beyond the bedside, and all of those experiences that I've had and everything that I've learned can expand so much more when I reach out to other nurses and sort of teach a class or a mentor or whatever that might look like in this leadership role.
Absolutely. So, to piggyback on several things that you said here, right? So, a lot of what I heard is you saying in order for you to refill your cup, right, to recharge, to realign with your passion in nursing, you found yourself having to step away from the busyness of the direct care, right?
Yes.
And so this is my story, right? I think this is a lot of our stories.
Hmm.
Many of us who have been in nursing for 10 plus years have found ourselves either pivoting specialties, right? Moving from one specialty to the next, maybe taking a break from full time direct care to maybe part time to have a little bit more flexibility and opportunity to engage in continuing education, maybe going back for a higher degree, maybe going back for certifications, maybe we're advancing ourselves from CNA to LPN, from LPN to RN, right? Whatever the case may be. I too have found myself being more passionate and more aligned with the call to nursing once I learn more about nursing,
Yeah.
right? Once I have invested in the professional development to gain a new skill set, a new set of knowledge, so that way I can take that and bring it back to the positions that I may have found myself struggling and or coming to a place of overwhelm or burnout,
Hmm.
right? So a lot of people think about burnout as this horrible, terrible thing. Let's just be honest. Every profession, every industry experiences burnout to some level. Everyone. Because human beings don't like to be told what to do. We don't necessarily function well when we're on strict deadlines and constantly having to, produce results. We're meant to be a little bit more free and flexible, and we're supposed to have bad days and off days. We're supposed to have days where we're not productive at all. We just want to lounge around and sleep all day because maybe that's what our body needs. But when you're in a position where you're not afforded that opportunity because you are everyone's everything all the time, like bedside nursing is,
Yes.
then it does become overwhelming. You do find yourself getting worn out, burned out, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, right? We start to run on empty. And so I found myself, once I get to that point, and a lot of people do this, you probably did the same thing. You get to that point, and you say, okay, what's next? Because right now, I don't see sustainability
Yeah.
with my trajectory. I have to do something different.
Yeah. And I
And
think
oh,
there's I think
go
there's a
ahead.
moment too. Oh, I was just going to say I think because I think it's an important point to acknowledge that there can be a huge feeling of guilt in that
Sure.
too. When you hit that moment and you realize that this idealistic sort of image of the nurse is like the constantly selfless person, the
Right.
person that's always going above, his, her, their way to do whatever they can for someone.
Right.
And when we realize the reality that that's not sustainable and that that's not even really a fair image of anybody
It's
to say the
not.
least, actually, but
Correct.
it's amazing that we can still feel that guilt, and I think
Yeah.
it's okay to acknowledge that, and it's insightful to acknowledge that can be a huge factor in this too.
Yeah.
We all know the value of self-compassion, but it's very challenging to actually put into practice and to take that step back, to zoom out and actually look and say, what else can I do here? What do I need in this situation in order to be my best for the people that I'm trying to
Correct.
take care of?
Correct. Because again, we tell the nurses, right? Oh, you got to take your lunch. You got to drink your water.
Yeah,
You have to take your PTO. When you're not feeling well, call out. But at the same time, not only do we struggle with our internal guilt for leaving our coworkers short-staffed, for leaving our favorite patients or residents without our care when they're the ones who tell us we're the only one who takes care of them as well as we do. But then we're also being guilted sometimes by our employers,
yes,
right? We're being told, oh, you're leaving your coworker short, or oh, this is going to be an occurrence used against you. And if
yeah.
you have three
Oh,
occurrences, you get written
yeah,
up,
but we'll
right?
be okay. We'll figure it out. Don't you worry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you
It's kind
you
of
take
like,
your time. We'll
yeah,
be
it's like a
okay.
backhanded kind
Yeah,
of compliment, but this is a
yes,
backhanded insult and you're
so
being
often.
ridiculed, right? So there's a lot. to talk about it. I'm not sure we want to go there, right? But finding alignment with the profession through alternative modes. Again,
Hmm.
maybe not doing full time at the bedside anymore because you're starting to get overwhelmed and maybe you are running on E. So going to a part-time schedule, which I'm on the side of administration
Hmm.
now, and I know how detrimental that is for a facility when your
Hmm.
full-time regular nursing staff goes part-time or per diem because they're tired.
Yeah,
But at the same time, how are we supporting those people in a full-time position?
yes,
Are we
certainly.
decreasing their workload?
Are
Are we
you, yeah,
increasing, the numbers of support staff so they can have the support? Are we giving them an extended PTO when they're sick or when they're bereaving or when they have to work on school? No, none of that
yeah.
stuff is happening.
The people
So,
that stay almost feel punished because
exactly.
they're staying full time versus the person that's maybe doing the right thing for themselves and going part time or per diem. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, administration cannot stop someone from changing their schedule.
Sure.
We'll be happy to have that part-time nurse come and work shifts rather than
Hmm.
not, right? So there has to be a balance. And so there's a lot of things that we can discuss regarding problems and issues, right? So the burnout thing, we've talked a lot about that. One of the strategies, we just put it out there, diversify, right? You have to
Hmm.
diversify your skill set, diversify your education, go back to school, take a break, maybe come up with a second source of income. We talk about entrepreneurship on this podcast, but
Hmm.
let's talk about what the challenges that you seem to have found in your career that you have now been working on fixing, right? Or
Hmm.
working towards a common goal to improve for the profession. So, what is the challenge for you that you wanted to address on this show?
I think a challenge for me that I see as sort of a running theme in my different roles within the nursing profession has been the ways that we sometimes seem like it worked to kind of keep each other down
Mm,
versus building each other up.
mm,
At that same level, kind of talking away from that the sort of gap between administration and practice for a moment.
yeah.
I've always been a big believer, and especially in the last few years, I've sort of come to become even more of a believer that that gap can be either a very small gap or it can be a very wide gap, but there
Mm,
will always be that gap to
yeah.
some extent. And I think, the empathy that we show in leadership positions toward the sort of our direct charges, the people that we're working with, I think sort of recognizing and being able to get in there and continue to get your hands dirty, sort of walk the walk, as it were.
Hmm.
I think that sort of changes that gap quite a bit. And over the course of my career, I've seen nurses in leadership positions that have, I think, done that very well, and then some that have done more kind of lip service to that.
Right.
Um, and so those have been, I think, exemplars for me as I'm now approaching this leadership position. Now I'm about a month deep, just about full time anyway with it.
Hmm.
And as I run into these situations where I'm seeing a lot of these dynamics where there's the infighting and there's the frustration and there's the constantly talking about staffing, we don't have enough, all of those things.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in that conversation and then lose that ability to sort of zoom out and take the perspective and say, okay, well, let's really look at sort of the efficiencies and kind of what we're doing here and kind of what that looks like. We've all had this rhetoric for a very long time that there's not enough nurses, and objectively there are.
Sure.
There is a shortage. There's been a shortage for many, many decades at this point.
Sure.
And I think that recognition itself is an important piece to kind of the whole puzzle that, like, the nursing shortage now, as we're experiencing it, as we're approaching it, is not something necessarily new. It's something that the profession
Mm-mm.
has struggled with for a very, very long time.
For a long
And
time, for
and
many
and
reasons that we know.
exactly,
Right.
absolutely. And I think for me, I when I that's actually helpful to sort of ground me in a moment where I might feel overwhelmed, where this has always been an issue. Yeah, this has always been an issue.
Yes.
And and yet another point in time where we continue to move forward and we
Yep.
continue to figure it out and work with it. And I think one of the messages that I've learned over the course of sort of seeing these conflicts and the ways that we all sort of shake our hands toward the things that have been issues for longer than most of us have been around and alive,
Hmm.
as far as that's concerned, is to really, what can we do to sort of unify our voices within that? And what are some of the
Right.
ways that we can celebrate the diversity within our profession?
Right.
Just for an example, and it's one that I my mind has changed on quite a bit actually, in the ways that we look at that we can enter the nursing profession. You know,
Hmm.
there's the diploma programs, there's the associate's degrees, there's bachelors of science in nursing, there's,
Hmm.
you know, the folks that have no degree in nursing whatsoever, and they go into these sort of graduate entry programs where, you know,
Hmm.
it's all an accelerated option. And I think for myself anyway, I think it was very easy, it's been very easy to sort of say, well, you know, if if they had just, you know, if we all did it this way, if there was sort of one standard kind of unified way of doing this, then the profession would look very different. We would all be on
Right.
the same page in the whole thing. But that's naive.
Sure.
That's really not accurate or true at all.
Not at all.
And I think it's been, I think the unity that I'm sort of seeing and kind of raising my voice in now more is sort of celebrating that diversity and saying, yeah, like there's a lot of ways that we can get into the nursing profession. There's so much that everybody can add to that. What are the ways that we can really collectively raise that voice up rather than focusing on the ways that we can keep each other down, or, you know, the eating of the young that we always talk about in
Sure.
nursing? You know, what are ways that we can really surmount and get past that? So I've found in kind of my leadership position now with this opportunity to be able to have that voice, you know,
Hmm.
with people in the clinic setting, you know, with home health aides in the community setting, um, you know, with really folks across the footprint that our organization really works within. You know, that messaging and that empathy and just that appreciation for what everybody does
Right.
really translates just in being able to talk about it openly and have honest conversations and, you know, sort of open forums for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, couple things here that I'm thinking of, right? So, yes, going back to the nurses eating their young, the senior staff, bullying or intimidating or like,
Entitlement.
maybe hazing like the newcomers, right?
Yeah.
Again, none of this is special to
Yeah.
nursing. This is
True.
human nature,
Yes.
right? So no matter what industry you enter, you're gonna experience this at some level. Why does it seem to be talked about more often in nursing, and why do nurses feel it a little bit heavier than maybe some other professions? And the simple answer to that is it's a stressful job.
Yeah, it's the nature of what we do. I mean,
Exactly.
it's the purview of what we're tasked with throughout the day. You know,
Correct.
not just the sometimes literally keeping someone alive if we're talking
Correct.
about an ICU setting, but, you know, helping them manage some of the most difficult instances that they've ever gone through. And then beyond
Correct.
their families, their loved ones, all
Right.
of the other things with that too.
Right.
So
You're
it's so
dealing
much
with
easier to,
dignity issues. You're dealing with loss of
yes.
life or limb. You're dealing with loss of control.
Yeah.
You're dealing with a transition that is very overwhelming and hard to understand. You're dealing with new diagnoses of life-changing illness, right? You're
Hmm.
dealing with
Lots of
people
unknown.
in physical pain, emotional pain. You're dealing with staff who are taking on a tremendous burden for caring for other people who are not their own family. They're trying their very best to figure out their needs, their preferences. There's a tremendous amount of rules and regulations that are put upon us that is higher than any other profession. We have more regulations telling us what we can and cannot do than any other profession out there.
And everyone always seems to have a different interpretation of those regulations too,
That
depending
part.
on depending on
I
who
was
you ask.
getting there, right?
Yes.
That part. And this is where there's been that long-standing argument about entry into practice, a certain point, because some people theorize that if everyone has the same entry point, there's less opportunity for misinterpretation, which I kind of agree with to a point. But nursing is way too diverse and needs to remain diverse in order to meet the needs of our communities. You can't have everyone at a master's level RN. It's impossible to keep
Yep.
up with the demands. It's impossible to employ those people. And it's not fair to expect everyone to spend that much time and money and energy into becoming masters prepared when there's plenty of job opportunities at a little bit of a lower level to start practicing, whether it's in the nursing home, in a
Hmm.
correctional facility, in home care. You don't need to be a master's prepared registered nurse in order to do those, jobs.
Yeah.
So we need to keep nursing diversified. But going back to kind of creating that unity around how do we appreciate and celebrate and elevate each member of the nursing team from HHA all the way through PhD, right?
Hmm.
Whatever it is, however you're contributing, it should be a set standard.
Hmm.
This is where I lean in heavy, and this is what makes me love nursing so much. We have a standard. It's been there for decades. The
Hmm.
interesting thing to me is when people do start to have their own interpretations of these standards, or they start to change the standards based on some of the challenges that we have. And when they deviate from those standards for convenience or for a lack of resources or
Hmm.
for a lack of training,
Perception of lack of resources, or
right?
yeah,
Or, yeah, or
exactly.
a perception of lack of resources, because that's
Sure.
not always the case. Sometimes it's we just get frustrated because maybe we have to work a little bit harder to make it work. But if we
Yes.
collectively work together, we can make it work,
Yeah. To
right?
the full scope of your practice. Yes,
Correct.
absolutely.
But, I'm in the classroom all the time. I'm teaching these new grad nurses. I'm teaching nurses who have been nurses for 15 years, and they still don't have the basic understanding of what the actual standards of nursing care are.
Yeah. And
So,
I think there's boy, there's so many different levels to that too, because
yeah,
we look at sort of I think looking to the professional associations, I think is kind of
sure.
diagnostic of why why it's muddled,
Of
where sort
course.
of we understand what the standards look like, because there are so many professional organizations that you can be a part of in nursing.
Correct.
And I find that very overwhelming sometimes when we think about, what is the one or two that we can look to. They are out there, and I think
Mhm.
at the end of the day, my perspective, I think, on this is changing as well. While I would like there to be sort of one or two, because I think there would be a unified voice that could come along with that.
Sure.
I think I'm coming around to the fact that maybe it is also a beautiful thing that there's such a diversity in the number of different professional organizations that we have, to be, these bigger voices at, like, the regional, the state, the federal level, when we're talking about setting these standards and helping people understand what they are.
Yeah. And so the different organizations, which I belong to many,
Hmm.
because just like
Same.
you, I love to learn and I love
Yep.
to see what each organization has to offer. Many of them are formed because they focus on a very special area of nursing. It's a
Yes.
specialty focus, right? So
Sure.
specialty focuses are important and they should set the standards for those specialties because it's impossible for one organization to touch on every specialty. So yes, that's why
Agreed.
nursing has so many professional organizations because we have so many different areas of human life that we
Hmm.
have to cover, right? From while the baby is developing inside of mom all the way through death. So the entire human spectrum nurses need to know. We have to
Yes.
have a foundational understanding of what to do during those different phases. And basic training for nursing covers all of that on the
Hmm.
surface level. And as we specialize, we go much deeper and become much more specialized in those areas.
I
So
think
that's why
this
we
is
have so
where
many of those.
Oh no, and no, and I'd appreciate that. I
Yeah,
think my perspective with that sort of is driven by my population, my specialty of choice. It's a population specialty. It's
correct.
geriatrics. And as a geriatric specialist, when people ask, like, well, what do you really do? When we think about the aging process, like, it's not just one thing that's getting older as part of your body. This whole, all of the parts of your
Absolutely.
body, the
Right.
whole system, and the energy surrounding it, the environment, the way that you're interacting with it, all of that is all aging at the same time.
Correct.
So that, I think, holistic perspective and appreciation for the way that we age and what that means and how it's felt and all of those things, I think has kind of colored my perspective to some extent with that,
Yeah,
because I sort of specialize in everything, because
sure.
you know cardiology, you know pulmonology, you have to know all of it with geriatrics, because
Correct.
heart and lungs and everything else gets older along with it, basically.
Everything gets
So
weaker, everything becomes more
yeah,
susceptible to illness and damage as
yeah.
someone gets sick. And yeah, so understanding how the body works as it ages, what risks someone is, and then what treatments work best for that age group, right? Because a
Mhm.
treatment for a 90-year-old will look very different than a 20-year-old.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
And the perspective has to be different too.
correct.
That older adults are not just old adults. They're their own group, and even within that, when you've met one older person, you've met one older person. You can't
That's it.
even sort
One
of
older person, exactly.
exactly.
They're very
You can't,
different.
yes, you
They're
can't generalize
just
from
like
one to the next.
Yeah, just like you and I, we're very different people. We could be around the
Absolutely.
same age, we could be from the same demographics, maybe socioeconomic status, whatever. We're still very unique. We have our own differences in chemistry, in belief systems, and culture. Like it's very different, right? So, and that is something that I think most nursing staff recognize. Most nursing staff, especially those people who have been around the block, maybe more than just one job,
Hmm.
they understand that pretty quickly. We learn that each person is their own unique individual, and we have to learn those preferences. We have to learn
Hmm.
how they respond to treatment. We have to learn what works for them and what does not work for them.
Hmm.
And we have to do our due diligence and communicate and document that so the rest of the team is also privy to that information.
Sure.
So we work well and in harmony to take care of the patients. I think for the most part, we do a pretty good job at that.
Agreed.
But going back to what you were saying, why can't we implement those same standards for each other?
Yeah, I was just thinking that with you know, if we take those same standards and that same appreciation and now apply it to what you're doing in a leadership role,
Hmm.
now apply it to the people that are, sort of looking to you for guidance, or, kind of looking to you in that leadership role,
Right.
and that's where I think it's kind of radical, but really not that radical to say that, like, I don't think as a leader, like I think in my head there's this feeling of like there's this one special thing that I've got to do. But at the end of the day, I think the secret sauce is that there is no secret sauce to it. It
There's no
really is
secret.
just it really is just basic human compassion and
Yeah.
basic human empathy, and taking all of those ways that we would consider good care at the bedside, taking that good care and expanding it to the people that we work with. I think
Absolutely.
there's no real magic there. And to something that you've said before that's really struck with me, and something I believe fully as well, is, it's not showing up at the pizza one day. It's not sugaring
Correct.
everybody up with a box of donuts.
Right.
It's dignity. It's recognizing people's time. It's recognizing that we can't physically, emotionally, spiritually, disconnect from all of the stuff at home. We can't leave that at the door.
Yeah.
That is, we travel with all of these stressors, all of these things that we carry, and there's a rhythm to that we need to appreciate and just recognize,
Yeah.
rather than saying, the suck it up buttercup, sort of philosophy of like, no, just like, you just have to do better because these people need you, that kind of thing. No, like, that's never made sense for humanity, for sort of working with
Exactly.
humans in general, and it doesn't make sense in the nursing profession either.
Exactly. And so, I think a lot of that has to do with just the kind of beast that our healthcare system has become, the money generating organization that it is, right? It is a money machine.
Yeah.
So much wealth has been built off of our healthcare system. And so those folks who own, they want to keep it that way.
Hmm.
I'm not against that. I'm all for it. Let's all become millionaires. Yay, right? Let's do it. However, you can't do it on the expense of other people.
Yeah.
You can't do it at the expense of safety, at the expense of human dignity, at the expense of, basic human rights. And if we're very quick as a profession to excuse someone who's grieving in the bed when they cuss us out, when they throw things at us, when they, are just really being difficult and threatening us, if we're so quick to just say, oh, they're grieving, they don't mean anything by it, let's use therapeutic communication, let's go in as a team and see what we can do to resolve their anger, frustration, and come up with a plan so that they're happy and we're all happy. If we spend so much of that energy doing that for patients every single day,
Mhm.
why can't we do that for our coworkers?
Yeah. How would the world be different if we could do that for our
It would
coworkers?
be
So much easier.
amazingly
Yeah.
different.
It would, yeah, for the
Nurses
better,
would
most
not
definitely.
hate their job if it were that way.
Yeah, there'd be a lot more satisfaction, I think,
It would be a
certainly.
lot more satisfaction. So, for those leaders out there listening, right, this is a call to action. You have to do better with the way you respond to your team's behaviors, right? Just like we say for a patient that a behavior is an unmet need, why is it not the same for our coworkers?
Oh my
Because
gosh.
we're highly educated, highly trained individuals. Well, guess what? Not
Hmm.
all of us are. Many of
I
us have an eighth grade level reading. Many of us have a 2 year college degree. Many of us have only been in a formal academic institution for 12 months of our life,
mhm.
and we're licensed because that's what the different states allow.
Yep.
And that's okay. We have to work with that. So
I,
you can't hold everyone to the same overarching standard that you have to be this astute, unbreakable, perfect image of professionalism,
mhm.
especially when the leadership sometimes are far from representative of that level of professionalism.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of double click on something you said there with the unmet need.
Yeah.
I was just recently involved in the orientation of one of our new nurse practitioners,
Mhm.
and I found myself sort of talking with her about that because we get a lot of folks in our program with an incredible amount of complexity. You know, they've
Yeah.
got the problem list that's a mile long,
Yeah.
very challenging psychosocial situations, lots of different things. And, we were having this conversation around, this person's been in and out of the hospital and they've got so much going on and, but but she said, but they've got all their needs met. They've got they've got their healthcare taken care of because they've got our program. They've got, a loving daughter, they've got a family member, they've got this. And she's like, why are they back and forth? And I said, the thing I always come back to is what is the unmet need for that
Yeah.
person? Who has asked her or that, has asked the actual person, what they think they're sort of missing with this because yeah, objectively maybe they've got all of the bases covered there, but if there is that unmet need and if you're not talking about that, then everything else that you're doing is just you're just sort of shuffling pieces around the board and you're not really getting to the heart of the matter. And I think that's really where
Correct.
nurses excel, is being able to get to the heart of things. That's
Yeah.
really the purview of what we look at, the phenomenon. The phenomena that we really get into is what it is to feel sad, what it is to feel
Yeah.
content, all of those things. I mean, that's really that's really the purview of nursing when we talk about it from the disciplinary perspective anyway.
Exactly. And when it comes down to education, because now you're in this new role, right? What I find frustrating, right, for me is that when someone makes a mistake, right, when a nurse makes a med error or a CNA acts unprofessionally in a heated situation,
Hmm.
or a nurse might give misinformation to a family member because they're not so poised to use that perfect script of let me get back to you, Rose, right? Like they
Sure.
don't know that, or they're overwhelmed and they don't think to say something like that, and they say something that offends the patient. It gets down to administration. What I find very frustrating is that there's an assumption that the staff have not been trained.
Hmm.
There's an assumption that they don't know what they're doing, with no objective investigation at all.
Yeah.
That also has to change
Assumption, the
because
key word there. Yeah.
it's really overwhelming for educational teams, leadership, the nurses and CNAs themselves to be accused of either violating a policy or protocol without objective evidence of such,
Hmm.
or making general blanket statements like, oh, they must have not been trained, or
Hmm.
maybe they don't know what they're doing, which maybe people don't realize this, but it could be interpreted as a direct representation of the people who did their orientation and training.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, like, I'm not one personally to get offended when people make these general statements, but when it becomes the norm, when it
Yeah.
becomes the expectation that
Yeah.
every time someone makes a mistake, the educator has to fix it.
Yeah. It's hard not to take that personally, but yeah.
Stop, right? At this point, it's like, when are you, as the leader, going to do your own assessment? When
Hmm.
are you going to take a step forward and go observe the person to see if you can identify what the problem is?
Sure.
Because if one person is saying they've already been validated for their knowledge and their ability to return demonstrate that they know how to do it,
Hmm.
why do they have to go through an in-service again?
Well, and sort of to put an even less fine a point to it, like sometimes a mistake is just a mistake. Like
Sometimes
we,
it's just a mistake.
like I mean,
Correct.
we're again like harkening back to what we were talking about before, that we're working in these incredibly stressful circumstances.
Right.
And I'm going to appropriate a quote. I can't think of who said it just now, actually, but it's, people don't rise to the level of their goals; they fall to the level of their systems.
Yes.
And so that's something I've been thinking about a lot more, to say the least,
Yes.
when we think about, if a mistake happens and it's a one-off, then it's a mistake.
It's a mistake.
You empathize with the person. It is what it is. When you see these patterns, when you see these themes, starting to sort of emerge more and more, that's where kind of looking at the perspective of sort of the system and being like, okay, like, how are we creating a situation where this is happening more and more as far as this is concerned?
Correct. And
Yeah,
so again, going back to the blame game, right? Going back to saying, oh, well, maybe they weren't
sure.
trained, or maybe the educator didn't do their job, right? Have you ever considered if the orientation and the training has not changed, but yet there's an increase in mistakes happening on the floors? Have you considered that it might be a factor outside of education and training? Have you considered it might be a staffing issue? There's not enough
Sure.
support staff. Have you considered that we have the same nurses working doubles 5 days a week? So they're exhausted and they're much more likely to make mistakes, right? Have you
Hmm.
considered that maybe there's an irregularity to the staffing patterns where you're floating people between units too frequently, so they're not developing understanding of flow and patient needs and
Hmm.
working with different members of the team? All of these are factors to consider. But I'm in New York City. And in New York City, things are very busy and very transient. People come, people go. It's kind of a reality of the place we're in.
Sure.
But there are many strategies to manage this if you collectively work as a team.
Yes.
And going back to what you're saying, if you create unity among the staff, if the leaders are seen more frequently on the floor, helping to problem solve and coach and mentor and have little mini huddles to say, hey guys, thank you so much for all of the extra work you've been doing. This is an initiative that we're doing for the whole building. So stay tuned. I just wanted to inform you. Do you need
Hmm.
anything? Actively take notes and follow up on those things.
Yes.
The staff would feel much more appreciated. They would feel much more inclined to work a little bit harder,
Hmm.
and they would trust their leadership that they have their best interest in mind, right?
Rallying around shared purpose and values. Yes,
Exactly.
totally. Yeah.
Exactly. So when there seems to be this divide, this lack of unity, it's because those things are not happening, right? The CNAs are not being given a good report by the nurses.
Hmm.
The nurses are not having long conversations about the importance of why they should be monitoring this person or that person a little bit more closely.
Hmm.
Maybe if the vital signs fall in this range or this range, can you come let me know right away? This particular person just went through this surgery, and so they're going to be very sensitive to pain. So
Hmm.
if they say their pain is approaching a 4 or higher, you have to let me know right away.
Hmm.
And then if you need help, come get me, and then be available, right?
Yeah.
So if that happened on a regular basis, the communication between nurses and CNAs would improve. The teamwork would improve. Same thing with
Hmm.
the managers. The managers had those conversations with the staff and
Hmm.
then jumped in when things got crazy instead of
Hmm.
saying, oh, I have a report to do that's more important, because
Hmm.
I'm sorry, but documentation can wait.
Well, and there's a comment there about honesty and transparency too,
Correct.
because when we're talking about, and sort of, I'm not going to say sort of cheerleading, but when you're trying to rally people around these purpose and values and things,
Yeah,
and we're using those words, but it's obvious that there's a disconnect there. If the more I sort of, sort of cheerlead it, if people aren't feeling that, if their
correct.
experience is something very different, and I'm not trying to see that unmet need, or if we're not having that active conversation, then that cognitive dissonance that they're going to experience when I'm saying one thing, but they feel something totally different, if
Correct.
we're not being honest and sort of transparent with that discrepancy, then we're not moving anywhere as well, actually. So I think again,
Absolutely.
the importance of sort of these forums and being able to have not just these one-on-one conversations, but these opportunities where we can have these huddles, even if it's just a moment or two to say, wow, like today's really been a today's really been a storm. Like what
Yeah.
can we, let's just acknowledge that for a second. Can we take a deep breath? Is there anything anybody wants to talk about right away before we sort of
Mhm.
get back into the mix there? I think there's a lot of ways that it doesn't have to be, a 45-minute hand-holding session. It can
Sure.
just be a huddle sort of throughout the day, basically interspersed. People can count on that as
Mhm.
an open forum where they can be validated. There's just a lot of opportunities there to be creative, I think, rather
Yeah.
than sort of the things that we think of. That self-compassion isn't just, taking a week off and, sitting on the couch eating bonbons. Sometimes it can be that, and that's
Sometimes
amazing.
it has to
But
be, but
exactly, and
like,
that's fantastic.
yeah,
Threaten me with a good time. But I mean, but at the same time, though, that's also recognizing that that's not the reality of like a shift.
sure.
That's not the reality of, sort of the average working day that a nurse is going to experience.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of creative ways that you can validate people's experience, though.
exactly. And so, one of the things that I found is so beneficial and a quick way to build a sense of respect and unity and collaboration is when you make time as a leader to be on the units. You don't have to go with a purpose.
Hmm.
Be intentional though, right? So for me, as like an assistant director of nursing, director of education, like dual role, right? I would go with the main purpose of being present. That's my goal,
Hmm.
right? My main goal is to be present and available for staff. So they see me, they can ask questions, they can clarify, and I can give a helping hand, right? So I carve time out in my busy, busy schedule to round on the units. And so when I would round, I would be doing my own assessments, kind of doing my own, audits, not making a big fuss, not bringing issues to people's attention in the middle of them being busy, because that's not the appropriate time to do
Yeah.
that.
Nope. Time and place.
Not yelling at people because their badge isn't on or whatever, but making notes, taking notes, kind of observing. And then when I do see a call bell or I do see a nurse struggling or I have a CNA that needs help, I help.
Hmm.
No questions asked. None of this on busy stuff. Just
Hmm.
help
Dive in.
because I've
Yep.
already carved that time out. So why not do the most I can? If there's a patient's family member standing in the hallway with a pitcher, looking for someone to say, hey, can I get you? I just do it. Hey, do you need some ice water? Let me help you with that.
Hmm.
If you see trash on the floor, pick it up.
Yeah.
You see, a CNA struggling to move a wheelchair and you go in and you help them. No questions asked.
Yeah. These are not monumental things.
And it
Yeah.
only
And yet
takes,
they make a world of difference.
oh my
Yeah.
God, do they? And it only takes a little bit more of your time.
Hmm.
And I do that a couple times a month. And you know what? They love me. They talk to me. They
Hmm.
feed me information. They trust me. They confide in me when staff aren't quite meeting the standards of what they would need to have a successful team.
Hmm.
They tell me when people are going through personal struggles. So that way the leadership team has a little heads up. So we're not just assuming they're slacking or not doing their fair share,
And
right?
you're less blindsided too when these things
Correct.
happen. You've actually
They
got some
feed
forewarning.
me so
Yeah.
much information that is so helpful to the entire organization.
Yeah. That
And
that
it's all
that
because
that
I've been present and approachable.
and that difference between being proactive and being reactive
Correct.
is just reverberates throughout an entire system. It's just
Correct.
amazing.
Yeah. But the key is that everyone has to be on the same page.
Yeah.
It can't just be one leader of the team. It has to be everyone. So for those, leaders out there again, whether you're the head guy or gal or you're low man on the totem pole, if you have a
Hmm.
team, You have to have these meetings. You have to have these conversations. You guys have to strategize and say, look, let's take turns, right?
Hmm.
Let's take turns rounding. Yes, you have to do environmental rounds, you have to do leadership rounds, whatever, but those are very focused. Like you
Hmm.
can't be spontaneous like what I'm recommending.
Yeah.
You have to carve out time to be spontaneous. You have
Yep.
to carve out time to just show up and be present and
Hmm.
just help them as much as you can. And it shouldn't be just the educator's job or just the unit manager's job or just the assistant director of nursing. It needs to be everybody,
Agreed. And
CNO
helping,
all the
yes,
way down, right?
absolutely.
Because then you have a solid team. Everyone knows you have each other's backs, and what Damien knows, the next person will know. So there's no secrets, there's no division. You create that unity,
Hmm.
and then you work as a team to handle the discrepancies, the behaviors, the mistakes, the unprofessionalism, or whatever else comes with the territory. Because no
Hmm.
matter how great of a system you have, these things are going to occur because we're all human.
Yep, that's the environment we work in. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So we talked about a lot regarding kind of bringing nursing together. So other than the strategies that we've shared so far, do you have anything else you would like to add that people can implement into their daily work right now? It could be at the bedside or it could be from a standpoint of a leader.
Yeah, I think just keep going.
Yeah.
Keep talking, keep being present, and
Mhm.
just validating your experience and other
Mhm.
people's experience, and just that change in mindset will again just reverberate through the entire system, and you will probably feel more satisfied too. So
Absolutely.
maybe there's something in that, hopefully.
No, there's definitely something there. And so, one of the things that I tell everyone, because, we're all guilty of it from time to time, but I try to reel myself in when I feel like I'm slipping, because I do try to be a role model, right? Um, when you're starting to have that negative talk, right, about the job, it happens. We're all going to do it,
Hmm.
but you have to know when to reel it in and then turn what you're frustrated about into something positive,
And
right? It's
productive too.
productive,
Yeah.
exactly. So I do believe that toxic positivity is detrimental. I do
Yes.
believe always being happy and always being optimistic is fake. It's not real, and it can create a lot of disenchantment, right? Because
Agreed.
once the person feels like you're being phony, you lost them, right?
Hmm.
So sometimes we do have to speak up and say, "This is a problem for me. I'm very frustrated. I'm very overwhelmed. This is not a safe situation, and we need to fix it." Right? Sometimes those conversations need to be had. But what I challenge everyone to do is instead of spending all the time talking about what's wrong, try to focus on what's right and what we can do about it right now, right?
Hmm.
Because there's always something you do right now. So if you have a coworker that seems to be going off on a tangent about how unfair everything is, their assignment is heavy, they're not taking their break, this is ridiculous, they're going to quit.
Hmm.
You could easily chime in on that conversation and just escalate it, and both of you are ready to quit. But instead, I always find that it's very helpful to look at the person and say, what do you need right now to be able to kind of gather your thoughts and let's just focus on getting through the day? Do you need me to do a med pass for you? Do you need a few minutes to sit down, go get something to eat and drink? Your sugar might be getting a little low, right? Do you need to eat something? What can I do to help you? You would be surprised how many people say, Damien, thank you so much for asking, but I actually don't need anything. I just needed someone to hear me. And I say, I hear you
I
loud
believe
and
it.
clear, my dear. I hear you loud and clear because I know what you're going through,
Hmm.
right? I'm not far removed from what you're dealing with. Even in my role, I'm not on the med cart right now, but I am
Hmm.
dealing with some of the same situations, the same frustrations, and your frustrations are mine as well, because
Hmm.
everything trickles back down to me. So staffing, compliance issues, mistakes, complaints, grievances, someone quits, someone's hired, whatever it is, it all trickles down to me anyway.
Yeah.
So I hear you, I feel you, but please, if you need help, call me. If you need someone to just spot you for 15 minutes while you go grab something, I'll do that. It's not a problem. It's amazing how easy it is to just say, hey, how can I help you? Let's focus on what we can do right now in the moment. And then later, when the time is more appropriate, we can get into a much deeper conversation and strategize about what could we do differently.
Mm-hmm. When you're honoring that dignity,
Correct.
it opens up the door. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the other challenge that I would like to just put out there for leaders is you have to make the time to actually circle back to these problems.
Yes.
Right? You
There
can't,
has to be follow through.
yeah, you can't just keep pacifying people and then expect for them to be satisfied with
Yeah.
that. Lip service only goes so far.
Yep.
And saying, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to do this and we need to do that, but it never gets done.
Yeah.
Right?
We're working on that. Tomorrow's a new day. No, that's people
No.
need to know right now what's happening.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then hold each other accountable for actually starting, even if it's slow and incremental, you have to be moving forward that goal.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be moving towards working on that problem. If you don't ever put in the new protocol or the new resource that can help to alleviate some of the workflow issues, then you're not really doing anything to improve the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, again, you're just talking and
running in circles.
So, yeah, amazing. All right, Christopher. So, if people wanted to connect with you, learn from you, collaborate with you, products, services, whatever you might have available to share, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just Christopher Norman, Christopher, Norman, Norman. I'm there on LinkedIn. I love to connect with folks to hear about other people's experience. I am constantly learning and would love to just connect with anybody that wants to reach out.
Amazing. Awesome, Christopher. So I'll make sure that everyone has your LinkedIn profile in the show notes of this episode. And I want to say thank you for taking the time to be on the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast, sharing your experience, sharing your perspective. Welcome to the newfound level of administration / education. It's a very interesting place to be. You're going to be happy with a lot of it and you're not going to be happy with a lot of it, but that's why we're here, right? That's why we're in these spaces. So that way we can leverage our prior experience, learn new things along the way, merge those two together and create the new standards of care.
Yeah.
Whether it is training, whether it is patient care services, whether it's organizational structures, we have the skill set and the know-how to keep nursing at the standards of care. And just one last thing about that. When you really want to lean in on getting everyone on the same page, don't deviate from the actual standards of care. I'm not talking about regulatory, what the state wants. I'm talking about what our licenses want, what our state practice acts wants, what the NCLEX expects us to do in different situations, the nursing process, right? The theories of nursing practice. We have to stay true to those foundational theories, right? Those foundational standards, because an HHA follows the same level of infection control standards as a registered nurse. So when we deviate from those standards, that's when we start to get muddled. That's when we start to have divide. Just go back to the books. It's really that simple. Go back to the books. This is the evidence. This is what we need to follow. Yes, there's always going to be changes and recommendations and new scientific breakthroughs that are going to challenge maybe some of the evidence that's been in the past, but that's why we need to stay up to date with this stuff. And
always
then
learning.
roll it out and just update everyone on the standard, but then hold people accountable to that standard. Don't just say, oh, today's busy. I'm not going to care if people aren't washing their hands. Absolutely not. They should always wash their hands no matter what, right?
Agreed. Very well said. Yes.
Awesome. Very good. So thanks again for being on the show. I can't wait to connect. I need to come upstate anyway. We need to come up there and visit. So
that'd be amazing.
Hopefully we'll hang out soon.
That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me, Damian. This has been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.
And that concludes episode 6 of season 4 of the Nursing Strategies for Success podcast with this episode's guest, Christopher Norman. We hope that everything that we shared in this episode will help you to become the nurse leader that your teams need you to be. All the ways to get in touch with Christopher will be in the show notes of this episode. And as always, if you have any questions about anything shared, please visit thenursespeak.com and get in touch with me. I would love to have a conversation with you. So until next episode, take care, be well, and remember that nurses can do anything.